I see people at the very end of their lives, so I know what prevents them from getting this ill. Let's distill it down into 8 pillars. Nutrition, what we put into our bodies as food, can have a dramatic impact in terms of our well-being.
Welcome to the summary of a CEO podcast, where we break down the sharpest business insights, boldest leadership lessons, and smartest strategies straight from the top. No fluff, just the powerful ideas you need to think, act, and lead like a CEO. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're cutting through the noise to get straight to the wisdom and your most important sources. And we're starting with a story, one that sounds almost, well, too incredible to be true. Imagine a 15-year-old boy. He's diagnosed with aggressive blood cancer and then develops this horrific flesh-eating lung infection. Doctors have done everything they can. They tell his family he has maybe 2 days left, tops, DNRs in place, and his one sort of dying wish, just to go outside. But what happened next? It just baffled the doctors. After only 2 days out in the sun, his infection was dramatically reduced, his white blood cell count improved, oxygen needs dropped. It was a recovery nobody saw coming. Joining us to unpack this and a lot more is Dr. Roger Seholt, a board-certified critical care physician. You work right at the very edge of life in the ICU, giving you this unique perspective on what truly extends our lives, what prevents illness, and you're here to help us break down some complex science into what you call life-saving advice.
So our mission for this deep dive is all about uncovering what you refer to as the unappreciated things, these factors that profoundly impact our health, our well-being. We're going to explore your new START framework, these 8 pillars of health. When they're strengthened, they act like strong links in a chain, protecting us from disease. Now, all 8 pillars are vital, clearly. But you've often highlighted one as particularly accessible, almost like the lowest hanging fruit, yet really powerful. And that's sunlight, isn't it?
It absolutely is, yeah. Sunlight is often grossly misunderstood. Its full benefits go way beyond what most people realize.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Because the common belief, right, is that sunlight's only major benefit is making vitamin D. And look, vitamin D is clearly important, and I know you even supplement with it yourself, but you've called this focus just on vitamin D a big lie. So what are we truly missing here?
That's right. The idea that it's only about vitamin D, that's a huge misconception. While vitamin D is important, and yes, I do supplement because the benefits are well established, focusing only on that, well, it masks a far more profound, more systemic impact. Sunlight affects our entire physiology, you see, not just vitamin D production on the skin's surface.
And this brings us right back to that incredible story, Amy Hamir's 15-year-old son. He had lymphoblastic leukemia. Chemo suppressed his immune system, which led to this terrible fungal infection, flesh-eating. In his remaining lung, the other one had been removed. Doctors gave him 2 days, DNR order. And then that simple request, I want to go outside.
Yes. And they wheeled his hospital bed out, BiPAP machine, everything. It wasn't, therapeutic intent initially. It was literally fulfilling a last wish. But here's where it gets truly fascinating. After just 1 day outside, his white blood cell count, a key marker for infection, started to drop. By the 2nd day, it dropped even further, and his oxygen requirements, they started to come down significantly. What's absolutely crucial to understand here is that nothing else changed. No other treatments were altered. He'd been on powerful antifungal meds for weeks, indoors with zero improvement. But just 2 days of outdoor sunlight, after 6 weeks inside, he was dramatically improving. Within 5 days, he was off the BiPAP, just on nasal oxygen. The doctors were just astounded. A CT scan showed the infection was 60–70% gone. He went home eventually, and ultimately, no sign of the disease after treatment.
That's just astonishing. It almost makes you wonder why hospitals aren't still designed like that, with ways to get patients outside.
Indeed. And it actually mirrors historical hospital design. Turn of the 20th century, hospitals were often built with verandas, specifically so beds could be wheeled out for patients to get sunlight. We even have studies, showing patients in hospital rooms closer to windows tend to be discharged faster. This history, these anecdotes, they were a huge driver for me to dig deeper into sunlight's mechanisms.
So, okay, if it's not just vitamin D, what's the underlying mechanism? You've talked a lot about the COVID-19 pandemic and observing that many critically ill patients, the ones with chronic diseases, obesity, heart disease, kidney issues, dementia, they seem to share a common root cause, mitochondrial dysfunction. Can you explain that a bit more for us?
Absolutely. Think of mitochondria as, well, the power plants of our cells, critical energy generators. What we now understand is that as we age, the energy output from these cellular batteries drops significantly, maybe by about 70%. I mean, imagine your house running on 70% less power. It affects everything profoundly. In the body, this leads to organ-specific problems, a fatty liver, a heart struggling to pump effectively, cognitive decline in the brain, all these chronic conditions we saw in the really sick COVID patients, they were fundamentally rooted in this cellular energy deficit.
Okay, and this is where infrared light fits in, right? It's not just the UV part of sunlight making vitamin D. There are other components penetrating deeper.
Precisely. There was this groundbreaking paper by Russell Reiter and Scott Zimmerman that completely shifted my perspective. Think about the physics of light. UV light is shortwave, it's superficial, makes the vitamin D, okay? Infrared light, though, that's longwave. And it penetrates very deeply, potentially up to 8 centimeters into the body tissues. This is crucial because that paper showed infrared light stimulates and upregulates something called mitochondrial melatonin. Now, this is not the melatonin your brain makes for sleep. This is an incredibly powerful antioxidant made right inside the mitochondria themselves. It essentially acts as the mitochondria's own internal cooling system, preventing destructive oxidative stress, that's the heat, that makes our cellular engines run too hot and causes dysfunction.
That's a fantastic analogy. The mitochondria are the engine. Mitochondrial melatonin is the radiator,
Yeah.
keeping it cool, stimulated by infrared light.
Okay, so how did this connect to what you were seeing during COVID-19? Well, it made perfect sense of the patterns we observed. The SARS-CoV-2 virus, it primarily attacks the ACE2 receptor in our cells. And that ACE2 receptor is itself part of the cell's natural cooling system. So by disrupting ACE2, the virus basically makes everyone's engines run hot. This explains why patients with pre-existing conditions, those whose mitochondrial engines were already running hot, already struggling why they were hit so much harder, they just had far less reserve capacity.
And the vitamin D connection during COVID, we heard so much about that initially, didn't we? Taking vitamin D supplements.
We did, and we observed early on, yes, that higher vitamin D levels seemed to correlate with better COVID outcomes. This led to widespread calls for supplementation. But here's the critical nuance. When they gave vitamin D supplements in the hospital to severely ill patients, it had very little effect. So I came to believe that high vitamin D was likely just a marker that people were getting more sunlight overall and specifically getting that crucial infrared light. The infrared was doing the heavy lifting at the mitochondrial level. The vitamin D was maybe a clue, but not the whole story itself.
Right, so we were chasing the marker, the clue, when the real impact was coming from the actual sun exposure, the infrared component.
Yeah.
You mentioned a control study in Brazil, too, that provides some pretty compelling evidence for this infrared effect.
Yes, a really remarkable study. They took hospitalized COVID patients and had them wear these special jackets. Embedded in the jackets were invisible 940 nanometer infrared LEDs. They wore them for just 15 minutes a day for 7 days. The results were statistically significant across basically every metric measured. Better oxygen saturation, deeper breathing, improved white blood cell counts, lower heart rate, lower respiratory rate. But the most important finding, arguably, was a 4-day reduction in the average hospital stay. They went from 12 days down to 8 days. I mean, just think about the massive implications of that for individual patient health or healthcare costs globally from such a simple, non-invasive intervention.
That is a huge impact from just light. You even had a personal experience, didn't you, with a patient that seemed to confirm this?
I did, yes. I had this one COVID patient, very sick, on very high flow oxygen, completely bedridden in a dark room and deeply depressed, understandably. I insisted against some initial resistance that we needed to get him outside into the sunlight. We wheeled him out daily for about 7 days. He told me later that first day outside felt profoundly good, just on a subjective level, but objectively, in just 5 days, he went from needing 35 liters of oxygen down to 15, then 12, then 8, and he was discharged home without needing any oxygen at all. Now, it's an anecdote, of course, just one patient, but for me, it powerfully reinforced the potential of this very simple, very basic intervention.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, what does the global data tell us about sunlight and mortality more broadly? Is there more evidence?
Oh, there's ample and increasingly striking data. Studies during COVID correlated latitude with the surges in autumn 2020 across Europe. The surges followed the decline of the sun. We saw studies from the UK, the US, Italy, finding that more sunlight exposure in specific regions correlated with lower COVID-19 mortality. And crucially, this seemed to be independent of vitamin D levels. But what's really shocking are the long-term studies. There's a 20-year Swedish study, followed 20,000 to 30,000 women. It found that those women with the most sun exposure had the lowest mortality from all causes: cancer, cardiovascular disease, non-cardiovascular disease. Conversely, those with the least sun exposure had the highest mortality. And here's the absolute kicker. The risk of death from having the least sun exposure was found to be equivalent to the risk of death from smoking.
Wait, hang on. Did you just say the risk of death from least sun exposure was equivalent to the risk of smoking? That's an incredibly powerful claim. And frankly, shocking. It completely flies in the face of decades of public health messaging about sun avoidance. Could you elaborate a bit? How do researchers even draw that kind of direct comparison between lack of sun and smoking? What are the mechanisms that make that risk so profound?
It is astounding, isn't it? And Richard Weller's larger UK biobank study, looking at 300,000 to 400,000 people, essentially reinforced this finding. He found no increased risk of melanoma, the most feared skin cancer, with more sun exposure, but he did find a significant reduction in non-skin cancer mortality. This led him to publish an op-ed titled "Sunlight: Time for a Rethink," urging the entire medical community and public to reevaluate our relationship with the sun. The mechanisms are complex, sure, but fundamentally it seems to come back to that improved mitochondrial health, the systemic anti-inflammatory effects, the antioxidant benefits of infrared light, and probably overall immune regulation that broad-spectrum sunlight provides. It's not just about what UV might do negatively, it's about the massive positive things the full spectrum of sunlight does for our internal systems.
That really forces us to reevaluate so many ingrained assumptions. It's almost unsettling how powerful something so simple, so natural can be. So, okay, what does this all mean for us, for you listening? What are the practical, actionable takeaways?
Right. For you, aim for maybe 15 to 20 minutes of sun exposure daily if you can. Now, the optimal timing, especially if you're concerned about UV exposure, is generally in the morning and the evening. During these times, the sun's lower in the sky, so the light travels more obliquely through the atmosphere, filtering out more UV, giving you proportionally more infrared light relative to UV. Midday sun provides the most infrared intensity, true, but it also has the highest UV index. So if you're out then for longer periods, caution with hats, clothing, that's still advised, and crucially, you need to actually be outside. Windows, even clear glass, block a significant amount of the beneficial infrared wavelengths.
I see. So getting outside is key. What about devices like, say, the bond charge mask I use sometimes, these red light therapy devices? Do they offer similar benefits? Can they mimic some of these effects?
Absolutely. Devices like that, which typically use wavelengths around 670 nanometers, that's in the red light spectrum, they are designed specifically to stimulate mitochondrial efficiency. There's research, like from Glenn Jeffrey at University College London, showing that just 15-20 minutes of this type of red light can activate a kind of switch in the mitochondria. This can lead to improvements in skin health by boosting collagen, potentially enhancing eyesight, and improving cellular metabolism. What's particularly fascinating is that you can get systemic benefits even from localized application. So applying it just to your face, for instance, can still have broader positive physiological effects throughout your body.
Which raises a really important question. If sunlight, this natural light, is so vital, what are the challenges in modern life that stop us getting enough of it?
Well, our modern lifestyle is just fundamentally different from what humans evolved with, isn't it? We now live, statistically, something like 92-93% of our lives indoors. And when we are inside, we're bathed in narrow-spectrum light LEDs, fluorescents. These lights critically lack the broad-spectrum profile of natural sunlight, especially that crucial infrared component. It's a massive shift from our evolutionary environment. And I genuinely believe this chronic lack of natural light input is creating what I call the scurvy of the 21st century. It's a profound deficiency in something our bodies are fundamentally designed to receive and absolutely need to function optimally.
That's a really powerful statement, scurvy of the 21st century. Wow. Okay, so beyond the profound impact of sunlight, your New Start framework highlights other fundamental, often overlooked elements. Let's talk about the air we breathe. What's beyond just, freshness when it comes to air?
Right. We often think fresh air just means fewer pollutants, less bad stuff, but I'd argue it's much more than that. Natural air actively gives us specific beneficial elements beyond just oxygen. These elements directly impact our immunity and our well-being. Trees, for example, they emit these aromatic compounds called phytoncides. There are Japanese studies on forest bathing, or Shinrin-yoku, particularly in Hinoki cypress forests. They've shown that spending time in these environments significantly increases natural killer cell activity. These are vital immune cells and promotes relaxation. And these benefits can last for up to 7 days after the exposure.
So it's not just a lack of pollution, but actual compounds from the trees entering our system and boosting immunity. That's really remarkable.
Exactly. And just generally, living in or near green spaces has undeniable health benefits, consistently shown in studies. A really striking example is the Green Heart study done in South Louisville, Kentucky. They planted about 8,000 mature trees in a specific urban area. Just 2 years later, they measured a 13-20% reduction in key inflammation markers, specifically high-sensitivity C-reactive protein, or HSCP. And this reduction statistically correlated with a 10-15% reduction in strokes in that population, independent of changes in socioeconomic status or exercise habits. Plus, trees also reflect beneficial infrared light, adding another layer.
That's amazing. Planting trees having such a direct, measurable impact on inflammation and stroke risk.
Yeah.
What about the air inside, though? Particularly CO2 levels. We spend so much time indoors now.
Yeah. High CO2 levels indoors are a real issue and often overlooked. It's common in smaller, poorly ventilated spaces like small apartments, offices, hotel rooms. High CO2 can significantly impact cognitive function, making you feel sluggish, less focused, kind of foggy. Simple actions can make a huge difference. Cracking a window, opening a door periodically, maybe using a CO2 monitor to see what your levels actually are. Even in your car, turn off the air recirculation button occasionally, let some fresh air cycle in.
Good tips. Okay, from the air we breathe to the water that sustains us, these elements are clearly more dynamic than we often think. And speaking of water, you talk about its external role too, not just drinking it, but therapies like saunas and cold plunges. We're often so quick to suppress fevers with medication, but you suggest we might actually be disarming one of our body's most potent innate defense systems. What's going on there with fever and our immune response?
That's precisely it. It connects directly to our innate immune system and the profound power of fever. When our body temperature rises during a fever, it significantly increases the production of interferon. Interferon is a crucial molecule that essentially creates an antiviral state in our cells, making it very difficult for viruses to replicate effectively. We routinely suppress fevers because, let's face it, they make us feel uncomfortable. But unless there are specific complications, like febrile seizures in children, routinely treating fevers might actually hinder our immune system's natural, powerful defense mechanisms.
Right, so fevers are the body going into battle mode. We often shut that down. How does this connect then to things like hot and cold therapies, saunas, for instance?
Well, saunas, or hot therapy, can be seen as a way to induce a kind of artificial fever. This heat stress boosts interferon production, mimicking some of the benefits of a natural fever. There are extensive Finnish studies showing a clear dose-response relationship. Frequent sauna use, say, 4 to 7 times a week, significantly reduces cardiovascular disease mortality compared to just going once a week. It's a powerful, accessible tool.
And the cold therapy side, the cold plunges or even just cold showers, what's the benefit there, especially after heat?
The cold exposure after heat offers sort of a dual benefit. Firstly, the cold causes vasoconstriction tightening of the blood vessels near the skin. Paradoxically, this helps maintain your core body temperature higher for longer after the heat exposure. Secondly, and maybe more importantly for immunity, it causes something called demargination. It effectively kicks white blood cells that are normally kind of loitering along the inside walls of your blood vessels into active circulation. This significantly enhances your immune surveillance and response. Even just a minute or so of cold water at the end of a hot shower can provide some of these benefits.
It's truly fascinating how these ancient practices, heat and cold, are being validated by modern science. Now let's move to rest in your framework. You emphasize the importance of darkness, not just sleep duration.
Indeed. We are facing a growing, often unseen problem in modern society, what I call dark days and bright nights. And unfortunately, this pattern correlates with increased mortality. What we truly need for optimal health is the opposite: bright days and dark nights. Artificial light exposure at night, especially the blue light from screens, does 2 detrimental things. First, it powerfully suppresses melatonin production from the pineal gland in your brain. Pineal melatonin is not just for sleep, it's a potent systemic antioxidant. Second, it confuses our master circadian clock. Our eyes act as the crucial barometer, telling our brain what time of day it is. Light at night delays sleep onset and disrupts our natural rhythms.
So what are the most actionable tips for us, for you listening, to optimize darkness for better rest?
Well, the absolute best solution is simply to turn off all unnecessary lights and screens well before your intended bedtime. Create a dark environment. The second best option, if you must use screens, is to use software that shifts the screen to redder tones or wear effective blue blocking glasses. But be aware, some light, even non-blue light, can still have an effect. If you're in an environment where you can't control the light, like a bright city apartment or when traveling, a good quality sleep mask can be very helpful. And definitely avoid night lights, illuminated clocks, or any LED displays in the bedroom. Your bedroom should ideally be as close to pitch black as possible to really allow your body to enter its restorative state.
Okay, great advice. Let's briefly touch on the other pillars in New Start, nutrition and temperance. How do these weave into this whole holistic picture you painted?
Well, nutrition is obviously foundational, isn't it? It's about consciously fueling those mitochondrial engines we talked about earlier. It means focusing on avoiding processed foods that tend to deplete us and prioritizing whole nutrient-dense foods that truly nourish our cells at a fundamental level. And temperance, which sometimes sounds a bit old-fashioned, is really about making mindful choices across the board. It's about recognizing and avoiding toxins, not just obvious ones like smoking or excessive alcohol or drugs like amphetamines, but also minimizing exposure to other stressors, perhaps even chronic emotional stress. It's about creating an internal and external environment where our body can truly thrive, not just struggle to survive. Strengthening these links naturally bolsters all the other areas of health.
You also mentioned vitamin D supplementation and melatonin supplements earlier. Could you just give us a bit more nuance on when and how those might be appropriate tools?
Certainly. Vitamin D supplements absolutely do have their place, and studies show benefits in specific contexts, reducing the risk of acute chest syndrome in certain populations, potentially reducing the risk of some autoimmune conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's, ulcerative colitis. However, I always advise getting your levels checked first via a blood test, because vitamin D is fat soluble, meaning you can theoretically overdose, though it's rare. Factors like your skin color, where you live, latitude, and how much time you actually spend outdoors significantly impact your natural production. And globally, deficiencies are very common. As for melatonin supplements, small doses, typically under 5 milligrams, can be specifically beneficial for certain things, helping with sleep onset if you struggle to fall asleep, managing jet lag effectively, or strategically shifting your circadian rhythm forward if needed. However, I generally caution against taking high doses routinely night after night. There's some evidence it might cause irritability in some people, and frankly, we lack good long-term evidence on what chronic high-dose supplementation does to the pineal gland's own natural ability to produce this vital hormone. Use it strategically, not habitually, is my advice.
That makes sense. Finally, let's talk about the last pillar, which might seem less tangible. Trust. It's truly intriguing to hear you, as a critical care physician so grounded in hard science, also explore these deeper, perhaps more philosophical connections. How does something like faith or trust factor into our physical health and well-being?
Well, you might be surprised, but the scientific literature itself increasingly supports a strong association between aspects of faith or spirituality and positive health outcomes, like reduced stress, lower rates of depression, and less anxiety. And beyond individual belief, a supportive faith community can provide immense social and emotional benefits, which we know are incredibly protective for health. There was one fascinating study by Krauss looking specifically at forgiveness, unconditional versus conditional forgiveness. They found that a belief in God's forgiveness was a major predictor, making individuals about 2.5 times more likely to practice unconditional forgiveness towards others. And that unconditional forgiveness, in turn, correlated significantly with less depression, less anxiety, and fewer feelings of inadequacy. It suggests a powerful psychological mechanism at play. Furthermore, there's evidence that integrating faith aspects into standard therapies, like cognitive behavioral therapy, can actually make those therapies more effective for individuals who hold those beliefs.
And on a more personal level for you, you find a profound philosophical connection here as well, don't you? In ancient wisdom.
Absolutely. It's a personal fascination of mine, seeing scientific truth that seemed to be alluded to, sometimes quite remarkably, in ancient texts, long before we had the tools to discover them empirically. For example, there's Paul's analogy in the letter to the Corinthians, where he says, "Your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit." If you really look, at the detailed description of Moses' sanctuary or tabernacle in the book of Exodus, chapters 25 through 30, the structure described there, piece by piece, remarkably mirrors the structure of the human body and even the human cell, as we understand it today. From the overall layout corresponding to the body's systems, the courtyard mirroring our blood system, the laver for washing like our interstitial fluid, the veil like the cell membrane, the inner room like the cytoplasm with its organelles, the lampstand like mitochondria, the altar of incense, and finally, the innermost holy of holies containing the Ark of the Covenant, analogous to the cell nucleus containing our DNA, the very code of life. The parallels are quite striking. And this detailed biological understanding, well, it wasn't available until centuries later with the invention of the microscope or the discovery of DNA structure in the 1950s. So for me, seeing these connections is truly fascinating.
What really stands out to me from this whole conversation is how deeply interconnected all these new START pillars are. It's not really about isolating one weak link and just treating that with, say, a medication. It's more about proactively strengthening the entire chain, building resilience from the inside out, holistically.
Precisely. That's the core idea. If we can consciously work to strengthen all of those links, sunlight, nutrition, exercise, water, temperance, air, rest, trust, we build a foundation for a longer, healthier, more vibrant life. Medications certainly have their place, don't get me wrong, especially in critical care, but they often work by leveraging other, stronger links in the chain, sometimes with significant side effects, to compensate for or protect a single weakest link. The real goal, the ideal, should be to proactively strengthen all the links, creating robust systemic health and resilience.
This deep dive has really offered so many easily graspable tools, practical things we can do, from simply prioritizing that morning sun exposure to maybe rethinking how we view a fever to opening a window. So, our call to action for you, our listener, is consider integrating some of these simple yet powerful changes into your daily life, especially maybe starting with that profound yet incredibly simple act of just getting outside more often.
It truly is about remembering what our bodies were designed for and trying to provide those fundamental inputs.
And that leads perfectly to a final, thought-provoking idea for you to haul over. Given how much of our modern lives we spend indoors, often missing out on these crucial natural elements like broad-spectrum sunlight, sight inside rich air, truly dark nights, consider this. Has our modern lifestyle inadvertently created a kind of scurvy of the 21st century? A widespread deficiency, not of vitamin C this time, but of these fundamental natural inputs that our bodies were designed over millennia to receive. What hidden benefits might you be missing simply by staying inside so much?
Thank you for this opportunity to share these insights today. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.